Developing black and white film makes me want to shoot in black and white more. After this period of developing black and white film, I feel like I'm more likely to pick up black and white now as opposed to defaulting to color like usual. So I want to talk a little bit about my time developing with Cinestill DF96, the process of shooting black and white, the pitfalls of developing, and why I think you should run a roll of black and white for your next project. There are going to be some time codes in the description, so feel free to skip around. I definitely think for me, I'm going to be going to the pitfall section often whenever I decide to start developing again. So back in the summer of 22, I finally decided to dive headfirst into the world of film development. Up until that point, I had only used labs and found the whole process of home development to be rather daunting. There was absolutely no way that I was going to ruin my entirely unique photos of gas stations and literal garbage. I developed a few rolls using Cinestill CS41 kit to mix results. Even though I was slowly botching my film with every turn of the Jobo tank, it was actually so much fun to be a part of the process, like everyone says. Overall, the process is extremely engaging. All of the cliche stuff you hear other photographers say is true.
All of it. It's all true.
But I didn't feel like the results were something that I could reproduce time and time again. As a result, I didn't develop too many rolls with the CS41 kit, and I let the chemicals expire before I could use them to their full potential. After developing an extremely color-shifted roll of Cinestill 800T, I decided to turn in my Jobo tank and take myself off the case. Cut to this summer, and I found the other bag of chemistry that came with my Cinestill kit, Cinestill DF96. Cinestill DF96 is a black and white developer that's actually pretty unique in the market. It's actually a monobath, meaning that the developer and fixer combined, allowing for a one-step process that makes developing a breeze. Just a little disclaimer, Cinestill's DF96 has a very interesting reputation online. I'm not going to get into that today, other than I did have a few issues with it, which we will touch on in a little bit. Cinestill states you can develop about 16 plus rolls with this batch of chemicals, and I ended up doing about 15 rolls within a 2-month span. During this period, my main film of choice was HP5 Push One Stop, but I also shot some Cinestill BWXX, Delta 3200, FP4, and Delta 400. Through this entire process, I started bringing my camera with me everywhere, which is something I've always wanted to do, but it's really hard to do on a film photographer's budget. Developing and scanning at home also allowed me to shoot more everyday scenes on a day-to-day basis, and I was super happy about that. It made film photography a little bit more casual and allowed me to capture more mundane moments that I typically would not shoot on film. Now, there are several great videos on YouTube for developing, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. However, I do want to talk about some of the pitfalls that I encountered in this process, so that way I don't have to go to photography forums from 2008 for the millionth time to figure out the answer. Photo-Flo and washing negatives. For some reason, this step of the process has always caused me issues. Either I used too much Photo-Flo and agitated it to create bubbles, or I just didn't hang them well enough, causing spots to dry all over the negatives. This also led to a bit of paranoia where I would double or triple wash films just to make sure that they were completely spotless and would not dry with spots on them. Once I've rinsed the negatives and agitated them with distilled water, I would add a small amount of Photo-Flo, approximately about 1 millimeter using a dropper, and let them sit for a little bit. After about 1 minute or so, I would dunk them in and out of the tank before taking the entire spool out to prepare for the drying process. Initially, I would just agitate and rinse the negatives, but I learned that negates the very purpose of Photo-Flo in the first place, so now I don't do that. Once out, I leave them vertical and kind of shake them to make sure that any excess water travels down the negatives instead of having them go long ways down whenever I hang them down to dry. In this way, there's less of a distance for the water to travel and allows for less water to stay on the negatives when you begin to hang them to dry. When moving them over to be clipped and dried, I will also hang them diagonally for the same reason. It allows for the water to travel across less of the negative as opposed to traveling all the way down. And I don't use any Kimtech wipes. I found that when I would try to use that method to dry them, it would simply leave fibers all over the negatives and result in hours of work in Lightroom. I found that it's best to just let them dry on their own. Document your devs. This is a bit of a side tangent, but it took me a while to realize that the best way to learn is to write down what I did previously and learn from those mistakes. It took me a while to finally add this step to my routine, and it caused me hours of searching online the same old sites to figure out answers to common techniques for film development. Temperature differences. Using DF96 allows a novice film developer 3 different temperatures and styles of agitation to choose from when developing their film. I often went for the faster method, and using pushed film meant that the water would be almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit when developing the negatives. I've learned online that some people say that that can be pretty damaging to the negatives, and since then I've started to use more of the middle agitation method in temperature. The idea of temperature differences with negatives really came into play when I was trying to develop a roll of Delta 3200 after a concert. Now, Cinestill recommends with films like this, namely tabular and the Delta film, to double the amount of time you're using, which I did, I think, correctly. But I think the issue came not from the development process, but rather the washing process, where at the time I was not monitoring the temperature of the water when I was washing it. And I think I left the tap on and it got a little too hot, and it resulted in a splotchy, blotchy mess all over the negatives. Luckily, this is not my best work, so I'm okay that those didn't turn out, but it's really important to make sure that your temperatures stay consistent throughout the entire development process. This is how I've diagnosed this problem, but if you think it's something else, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Reticulation. So on one roll of HP5, I found that I had a really weird pattern emerge in the grain structure on the film. It was a little bit more pronounced than other grains I'd ever seen before, and upon a little bit of research online, I learned that this film was suffering from reticulation. This is the act of distorting the emulsion layer of the film, which typically results in a pattern. You can see that the grain structure is elongated and forms this kind of little fun little 90s pattern, if you want to call it that. This is also typically caused by temperature differences in the development process. And this roll was developed before I was monitoring my temperatures across the entire development process. I don't actually hate this roll. It's actually pretty interesting to me. And online, there are even people who work on trying to figure out ways to produce reticulated results consistently across development. So there could be a bit of a use case here if you're interested in this style. Developing two rolls. This is really more of a cautionary tale than a legitimate issue, but I forgot that there's a little red clip that you need to use when you're developing two rolls, and as a result, when I was developing two rolls of 120, the first image and the last image of each roll stuck together and perfectly blocked out the subjects of this image. It's a bummer, and it's a learning experience, but I'll never forget the red clip again. So yeah, it's pretty artsy overall, but definitely not what I intended. So why black and white? After all, you could always just shoot color film and then change it in post. But ultimately to me, black and white comes down to intention, first and foremost. You've heard it said time and time again, but black and white removes the typical considerations that one would think of when shooting color photography, for example. You're placed into a different mindset, and you can never really get into that mindset unless you start practicing black and white and shooting in this style. Objective versus subjective. Deciding to shoot in black and white is inherently a subjective choice that alters reality in an artistic way. Black and white can make your images moodier and even apply more of a thematic angle to your work if that's what you're looking for. It's going to bring something more than a simple documentary approach with color photography, which provides a more objective view of the world. Black and white also has an inherent level of nostalgia to it, based on the fact that older images will be in black and white. So there's that consideration too, depending on what you're trying to evoke out of the images that you're making. It can also bring an air of seriousness to the work that you're capturing, like old photographers from years past. Composition. Composition is king in black and white photography. Without color, you're no longer, not necessarily hiding behind it, but your work needs to stand alone by itself. The subject matters so much more in a black and white image. Trying to ignore composition will only result in a bad image, either in black and white or color. So always make sure to take that into account when shooting black and white. I find that the process of shooting black and white also makes me take a step back and think about these questions even more, which all comes down again to intentionality in your photography. Film as a whole is an exercise in intentionality, but black and white really brings this idea to the forefront. I would be remiss to not bring up the price point of black and white film. With the cost that I'm saving from development, I was able to buy approximately 3 rolls per development when shipping it out to my local lab, which is great because it just meant for more rolls and save time in development. However, there is a trade-off. People say that time is money, and well, the money you're saving results in time in Lightroom, in post-processing, scanning, developing, all of that. You had to pick your battles, and this one allowed me to shoot a lot more film, so I think it was worth it. With HP5 only costing $9.99 a roll, it made it really easy for me to just keep buying HP5 and continue shooting it daily. Because of this, I was also able to experiment with different black and white film stocks that I hadn't shot prior, and I was able to experiment with pushing them various stops and see what I liked the best. Definitely a huge plus to black and white photography is that all light is now your friend. You no longer have to worry for golden hour, blue hour, an overcast day, whatever you fancy to shoot color film. In this case, you can shoot black and white whenever you want. All of this added up to a shooting experience that allowed me to always be ready to shoot film. It really made me able to practice photography at all times, having my camera always available to document the littlest moments near me. All this resulted in me learning to love having my camera by my side, and I love black and white now. Here are a few of my favorite images from this summer that I captured on various black and white film stocks.
Walking outside labyrinthian over cracks along under the trees. I know this town grounded in a compass, cardinal landing in the dogwood. I keep going over it over and over. My steps iterate my shame. How come every outcome's such a come down? Lately afternoon with the shades drawn down. Kept saying I just wanted to see it. Saying what's wrong with that needle shaking outlines in a compass. Every outcome such a come down. I knew it when I saw it. So I did just what I wanted. So saw your boyfriend at the Port Authority, sort of fucked up place. Well, so I averted my stride on a quick one. Just coming back from going over your place, I feel like we could forget about it. I feel like I could mellow out. I don't feel undone in a big way. There's nothing really bad to be upset about. When I thought I was getting better, I woke up on the ground. An appointment or disappointment, setback on a come down. As if I needed a reminder. Oh, I do only what I wanna. So I go through with this.
So all these factors combined led to a summer that was filled with black and white film rolls to buy, develop, scan, edit, rinse, and repeat. I was able to shoot so many more rolls than I typically would have within this period, and I was able to capture mundane scenes that I typically wouldn't have. And I'm so grateful to have been able to have this experience, and I'm really excited to start developing again. Some would say to just get a digital camera for these types of moments, but I would argue that film photography just can't be beat in that regard. Seeing the world in black and white is just such a pleasurable experience, and I'm going to be defaulting to black and white film more often after this. So thank you all for watching this video. I'm really excited to have given DF96 a chance, and I'm on the lookout for a new developer to start developing black and white again. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, you know, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Happiness and I'm sorry.